Good morning, everyone. My name is Theo Knoll. I'm the Affordable Housing Program and Outreach Manager, and we're really delighted that you've joined us this morning to learn about the 2023 Affordable Housing Program, and in particular, our program scoring categories and how these work in the online application. I'm joined by several of my colleagues here at the bank, Kathleen Amante and Mike Pinkpank, and I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves as well.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kathleen Amante. I'm one of the 3 senior community investment managers here at the bank. The territory that I cover is Rhode Island, Connecticut, and southeastern Massachusetts.
I am Mike Pinkpank. I'm one of the other senior community investment managers here at the bank. I handle everything in New Hampshire, Vermont, Worcester, and everything to the west in Massachusetts, as well as all of the projects that come to us from outside of New England. And I also handle the Jobs for New England program. And our third is Toby, and I think she's on the line.
I am. Good morning, everyone. I'm Toby Goldberg. My territory includes Maine, Eastern, and Northern Massachusetts.
Terrific. And the 4 of us are your front line for all of your questions regarding the Affordable Housing Program and the application process this year. We're really, again, happy you're taking the time this morning. We really want all of your questions as we go through the presentation today. So you can type us a question in the chat, or you can click on raise your hand, and Kathleen, Mike, or myself will see you, call on you, and unmute your microphone so that you can ask your question. And please do so at any point in time. This is the whole point of the webinar. The other thing I've done by way of getting us started is we've placed several files in the handout section, which we'll reference throughout the presentation. These include the self-scoring worksheet, which is a quick checklist of our scoring categories, and the 3 empowerment templates that you'll need to use when you are uploading and documenting your economic empowerment services. So with that, I want to get started, and I have a rather sensitive mouse, so my apologies if we do bump around from screen to screen. And we do have the webinar being recorded. This is only so I can type up our transcript and for future training purposes. So please don't let that stop you or inhibit any questions or answers. Here is our agenda this morning. We're going to give a quick review of the bank and our team, get into the overview of the program and the 2023 changes, and then we're really going to go into details about the scoring specifics. We'll wrap up with some key reminders and some Q&A. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston is the wholesale cooperative bank serving our 430 plus shareholders across New England. And our mission is to provide wholesale funding, liquidity, and the financial products and services to help our members serve their communities. And on the community investment side of things, this means supporting home financing, affordable housing, and community development, including programs targeted to lower income households. And these run the gamut, as Mike mentioned, from our economic development, small business lending program, Jobs for New England, to the affordable housing program, our down payment closing cost assistance programs, the equity builder, and the HOW programs, and our newest program, Lift Up Home Ownership, as well as the Community Development Advance. All of these are capital financing programs designed to help community development investment, from investing in affordable housing initiatives, which is what we're talking about, to providing down payment assistance to first-time home buyers of a wide range of incomes, and small business lending. Diversity, equity, inclusion are really core values of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. and the Federal Home Loan Bank system as a whole. This really takes the form of working on capital markets and how we solicit capital in order to lend it to our shareholders. And we are continuing to expand the number of capital brokers that we work with so that we are reaching a more diverse set of capital suppliers. Obviously, our workforce is the most important asset of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. And so diversifying this workforce, making sure we are reaching out to a wide range of skill sets and backgrounds is really critical to assisting our members and sponsors in meeting all of their community needs. And obviously, supplier diversity is also a DE&I sort of mainstay and value. What we're really excited about is diversity, equity, inclusion is part of broader value and practice for the Home Loan Bank system. And we've got a new report called Opening Doors, Changing Lives. And it's referenced here, and we hope you take some time to look at it. And you know, we're always very open to feedback and help in expanding and I think being truer to our DE&I values in practice. So love your feedback as well. Here is the entire HCI team. You can see Kathleen, Mike, Toby, and myself. But we want to introduce our director, Ken Willis, our assistant vice president and HCI operations manager, Livia Bork, as well as the rest of our team. We are, as you can see, housing enthusiastic, and this really pervades everything we're talking about, and we're really delighted to help you work through your affordable housing program application this year. So touching on just a couple of quick updates to the program. We've got more subsidy available this year. We're starting with 21.25 million of subsidy allocated, and we've made some significant increases in the amount of subsidy that any one application can apply for. The total maximum subsidy that any one application can apply for is 1.2 million. This is basically doubled from last year, where the limit was 650,000. Of that 1.2, 850,000 is the maximum direct subsidy capital grant that you can apply for. Again, this is an increase. And recognizing that homeownership not only is important, but really costly to do, we've increased the homeownership subsidy per unit from $40,000 to $75,000 this year. The one thing that's remained the same is our member approval limit, which is 25% of the total subsidy being allocated in the round. We're excited to make these changes, and we're making them because of the changing and more expensive housing development environment that all of you are operating in. I think a lot of you know that AHP really provides flexible capital development subsidy. And you can use this to meet pretty much any of the capital development costs and needs in your housing initiative. So that means acquisition, construction, rehab, it means soft cost, it means paying the eligible amount of the developer fee. It really runs the complete gamut. There are a few ineligible uses, and these really speak to the purpose of the affordable housing program, which is funding affordable residential spaces for people earning at or below 80% of the area median income. So non-residential space, capitalized reserves, supportive services, or operating costs are not eligible. Non-residential items, such as furniture, fixtures, and equipment, social services, or other bank fees related to using the AHP funding is not eligible. Pre-development activities are also not eligible because we want AHP to be funding your initiative for the acquisition, construction, or rehab, putting this project into place. Refinancing is permitted, but it's a little complicated based on our regulation. You've got to generate equity proceeds through the refi that equals at least the total amount of the AHP subsidy. So if you are refinancing existing debt and you want to use an AHP subsidized advance, we really want you to talk to us and think through that a little bit more. Our online application deadlines this year, the application opened June 5th. It closes July 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And that July 27th date is the date for housing sponsors to fully complete the application, entering all the data, uploading all the documentation. Members have an extra week to review and electronically submit the online application by August 3rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Really glad that you've attended today's webinar. We have our feasibility webinar on June 13th, and that's going to go into the details about how to put in your sources, your uses, your operating pro forma, and complete the online application to show us eligibility, feasibility, and need for subsidy. We really like the extra week for the member application review period. This allows for sponsors to complete the review and electronically sign it by July 27th, but helps give members a little extra time to review the application, complete their underwriting, and upload their required documentation. So we get the application submitted in a more orderly fashion and doesn't create a lot of rushing to the deadline. Some key points about the Affordable Housing Program. AHP provides direct capital grants and interest rate subsidy on long-term debt. And that interest rate subsidy is used to subsidize permanent debt. And when we talk about subsidizing debt, we mean borrowing an AHP subsidized advance from us. That's debt that we sell to the member institution at a below market rate cost. The member adds their spread and makes a loan to you, your development for your permanent debt. AHP is really a gap funder. As I think all of you know, it's very competitive, and we have an online application, and here's the website. We are going to stress in a number of times throughout today's webinar that you need to be using the 2013 March revision date of our AHP implementation plan. This is our policy document. It includes everything we're talking about today, and it really details everything about AHP eligibility, scoring, and feasibility. Also on our website is our 2023 Notice of Changes. And here's our regulatory citation that is the federal basis for a lot of what we're talking about today. It's 12 CFR 1291. There are several core components to the Affordable Housing Program that's really established in our regulation. It's program eligibility, feasibility, need for subsidy. And getting through those three hurdles, then the last area to qualify for AHP and get a funding award is going through our scoring categories and scoring enough points so that you are able to secure funding in our capital funding round. AHP is capital funding for households earning up to 80% of the area median income. We need sponsors to demonstrate through the sponsor registration process that you've got the staff, the track record, and the capacity overall to develop and operate your housing, and that your housing development costs make sense. And this leads into feasibility and need for subsidy. Need for subsidy is a big part of the AHP regulation, and perhaps something a little bit different from other funders. So we're going to need you to demonstrate that you have a capital gap in your sources and uses. And if you're a rental initiative that you're not generating additional cash flow that could support more debt and use less of a subsidized advance or less of a capital grant. Here are the 5 steps to completing your application. We're getting started today. Hopefully you've completed your sponsor registration. And then the second step is to, in the online portal, invite your member institution. Members are essential to the affordable housing program, not just the application process, but really the overall success of your initiative and completion of all of your regulatory steps in the affordable housing program. So once the member has accepted the online invitation, that takes us to step 3, which is really the body of the application. And that's where sponsors will fill in all of the application data and documentation. You'll sign it, as we said, by the 27th of July, and members will review and electronically submit it by August 3rd. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Pinkpank.
Thank you, Theo. So as Theo discussed, AHP is a highly competitive program, and we do have some detailed scoring categories that we're going to work through today to help you fully understand what we're going to be looking for in the program. It's a highly competitive process, but it's also a regulated program. And within this framework, we've designed 11 categories to identify our values and priorities for the application. For those of you that are familiar with the process, I do want to point out that this year we have a new in-district priority. That means projects that are coming to us from within New England. The actual physical site of the project is in New England. Will earn 5 points on the application. This category is new to us. We're actually the final home loan bank to add this scoring category. And so now we're kind of on par with the rest of the home loan bank system with this. The other categories you probably know: community stability, economic diversity, rural geographies, and member financial participation. Lastly, though, diversity and inclusion. This is Boston's own category that we came up with. We're the first in the nation to do this. It's our 3rd year implementing this category. We really value diverse development teams and encourage sponsors to partner with minority, women, veteran, and disabled-owned for-profit businesses to build your housing. You can have up to 3 partners. This year, we do have a self-affidavit, and we have eliminated the DE&I plan. So this scoring is going to be a little bit more streamlined for this category. And we'll get into that a little bit as we go further along. Next slide, please. So the AHP scoring, we've got these 13 categories here, loosely grouped together. On the left-hand side, we've got geographic-based categories. The first 3 are fixed, yes or no, and donated is based on the percentage of total units being donated. In the middle, we've got the development team and financing, and on the right, we've got programmatic categories related to the goals of your initiative, and these are all variable scoring. As I mentioned, the in-district category is new, and that's for the New England locations only. And we made a few little changes to empowerment. That's going to be down to 6 points this year, and community stability down to 17. That's because with our regulation, we're actually capped at the number of points that we can award to any project. So it's kind of a balancing act to make everything work. The great thing about our scoring system is that it is entirely transparent. Other funders may place value on highly edited narratives and telling a great story. We value a great story, but that's just for our understanding of the project. we take the guessing work out of your scoring. You can actually self-score your application. And if you look at it through clear eyes and are realistic with what your scoring is, you can tell exactly what you're going to get. That's the beauty of our process. There's nothing hidden behind a curtain. You see what it is, and that often helps folks to understand where you stand in the process, and areas that you can work on. Above all, we stress to be honest with your application, be honest with your project, and by that, what I mean is don't promise us something that you cannot deliver. The AHP scoring is something that you will be living with, not just at the day of the application, but throughout the lifetime of the project and its retention. If you're going to promise us something along the lines of a homeless set-aside, for example, that is something that we will be looking at when we go to give you your money and during the retention period following completion. So just be aware of that. Same thing with empowerment, stability, member financial participation, anything like that. We will be constantly referencing your scoring. It becomes part of your agreement with us should you be awarded. So again, be honest with your project, be realistic, and don't overpromise us something that you can't deliver on. Next slide, please. A big part of AHP is the partnership that we have with sponsors, members, and the Home Loan Bank. It's an agreement essentially where the three parties are all working together to deliver a successful AHP project. And at the core of that is identifying and eliminating sources of fraud. And by that, we could have intentional or unintentional fraud. And if there is any of this, we really need to know right away. Some things can be worked around. If there's something where there's a misunderstanding with the guidelines or something like that, we can try to right the ship. However, there are certain areas that we just have no tolerance for, obviously. Falsifying information, fraudulent documents, that sort of thing. Again, notification of the bank for any changes in the project, things like that. Please keep an open line of communication with us, and we can avoid any sort of unintended consequences down the line. So to dive into the categories, we do have a lot of the application is keyed on the location itself. As you're building your application, please don't skip around. The application kind of builds on itself. So sometimes when you change something, it can have downstream impacts, namely location. Please get that accurate right at the beginning, because it could impact the rest of your application and kind of cause a ripple effect. Some categories like rural, it's a USDA defined category. That's really just based on your application. It's yes or no. Same with in-district priority, yes or no, based on your location. And then same with economic diversity. What we're looking for there is mixed income housing in a high income census tract, or actually, sorry, mixed income housing in a low income census tract, or affordable housing in a high income tract. And again, that's just really going to be an automatic scoring category, taking data from your project, the location, and what you plan to be doing with your housing and your units. Again, don't overpromise. Give us what you plan to do with the project, and that'll set the score for that process. The next category is donations. So for this, it's a variable category for 5 points. We're looking for donations or conveyances on arm's length transactions, defined as transactions between parties that are not affiliated through co-sponsorship of the application, ownership, or control. If you have questions about that, please reach out to us. and we can help you understand the way that the scoring category is set up. We can't tell you, we're not going to tell you definitively whether or not you're going to get points, but we can kind of point you in the right direction with the implementation plan and understanding how we're going to be looking at that. So if you have a true donation for a nominal amount, it's not going to require an appraisal. If you do get an appraisal for projects, though, it's going to be from a licensed appraiser, or you can use the current tax assessment card. If the donation hasn't occurred yet, we'll confirm the donation at the time of disbursement. Again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying about the overpromising in the application, and living with the same scoring throughout the process. Some items we do check again at disbursement if we have promises for it in the application. Long-term nominal cost leases may qualify. And then you can also earn 1 point if it's land or units conveyed by the federal government or an agency of the federal government at market value. So documentation, this is really key. Throughout the scoring process, documentation is what often makes or breaks an application. And in this category, we're going to need the evidence of the donation. We're going to need their appraisal and or the tax assessment to document the market value. And this is, again, from a state licensed or certified appraiser, no older than 6 months prior than the date of closing or transfer, with documentation of sales, such as recorded deed, letter of donating entity stipulating the donation and sales price. If the property was transferred within 5 years prior to the AHB round and no appraisal was done, you can provide the tax assessment establishing the market value at the time of purchase along with the closing disclosure, or another document evidencing the actual purchase price. If the property hasn't been transferred at the time of the application and an appraisal has not been ordered, site control documentation such as P&S or a purchase option, along with the tax assessed value, it can be submitted, and the price and value will be reviewed at the time of sale to ensure the continued eligibility for the donation. So, kind of at the time of application, we know that projects are coming to us at various stages. We're looking for that site control. We're looking for a project that is, under your control. So we understand that sometimes the site control and donation kind of go hand in hand. You may have site control, but the donation documentation isn't, fully settled at the time of application. That's fine. We can get back to that at the time of disbursement. But the key here is that you do have that site control through the sponsor or the co-sponsor. You can own it outright. You can have a P&S, an option, or other designation. And above all, we really need you to explain this. Please do not give us 150 pages of documentation and expect us to sift through it to find a paragraph tucked in there somewhere. Give us a cover memo that explains the documents. Make sure it's clear, and we can follow your logic in the flow of site control that leads directly or indirectly to the sponsor and co-sponsor. Give us that map that we can follow to make it easy to understand how you have that site control, because we absolutely understand that it's not always a straightforward situation. But again, if we get tripped up on this, there's a chance that your application will be tripped up. So documentation is critical and often really confusing. We give you a text field to explain the site control. You need to upload all the documents to get a clear line of sight, especially if there's multiple parties or subsidiaries owning. Also, if there's multiple sites in your project, we need clear site control documents for each site. We do set aside applications each round because of poor documentation, and we expect a big round this year, so don't put your application at risk by not having that clear line of sight. Take a look at it. Have somebody that isn't as familiar with your process, or I mean with your project, review what you're submitting. Grab one of your coworkers that's not working on the project with you, and have them read it over and tell you if it makes sense. And you'll get a better idea as to what we're going to be looking at. We just need that clear line of sight, make it easy for us to follow. Just a screenshot here on tips and tricks for the location. Again, the application is going to be building on itself. Get that location right off the bat. I know sometimes there's a temptation to skip ahead to look at other parts of the application, but certain areas like location, you really need to get it exact from the start. We have some help topics in this area. We have some links, as you can see, with the census tract. We're going to be using the FFIEC 2022 data because it has not been updated yet for 23. And then obviously you're going to be picking the building type right off the bat. And this matters for your hard construction cost per square foot feasibility validation, the RS means benchmark data. The list kind of goes on and on as to what the location screen will impact if you change it down the line. So please just get it right from the start and then build it off of there. So the next scoring category is the nonprofit sponsorship. It's pretty straightforward on this. For rental projects, we're looking for nonprofit ownership, and it's going to be either 1 or 5 points based on the term of ownership. A managing member of a GP is acceptable for 5 points in the rental category. And then home ownership, it's a 5-point fixed category. The nonprofit is going to have integral involvement in the development of that of the home ownership units there. And here's one for the inclusion of MWBEs on the development team. Again, the Home Loan Bank of Boston is committed to addressing the disparity in participation of minorities and women in affordable housing, development, preservation, and as such, this category does mean a lot to us. We do include veteran-owned and disabled-owned firms as well in this category. And as I mentioned before, there is a change from last year. We now have a template for self-certification for each eligible development team member. That is required. You have to fill it out. Even you as the sponsor have to do this. If you're expecting to get points on this category, you'll have to do this as part of your sponsor registration. And quite simply, no affidavit, no points. In the past, it's been sometimes a guessing game because folks will enter development team members in different parts of the application. And it left a little bit too much unknown in our applications. And so we're going to be looking for that affidavit that the eligible entity, the eligible development team role firm will be signing off on. For this section, especially, check out the IP to see who qualifies. It'll help a lot. Throughout the process, we're going to be referencing the implementation plan. Keep it on your desktop. The current plan, as Theo mentioned, is from March of this year. That really has everything in the scoring categories detailed. As I mentioned, our scoring is very transparent. Everything that we do, we follow that implementation plan to make it easy for you and for us to know what the score is going to be. So when we're evaluating an application, we're going back to the IP definitions. So it makes it nice and easy for you to follow. So member financial participation. We continue to recognize the importance of our members' long-term involvement in these initiatives. As such, we've kind of got a two-tier scoring system. Member involvement throughout the process really helps deliver a successful project. They are our eyes and ears on the ground. They understand the project better than we do. They understand, they know the sponsor, they have the relationship with the sponsor. And as such, we don't want our members to just be a conduit for passing through grant funds and things like that. We want to encourage folks to maintain and build that relationship with the member banks. So we have 10 points when the member loan or investment is equal to the subsidy requested. So that could be a construction loan or line of credit. It does include any sort of permanent debt or tax credit investments. So simply, if we, we'll total up what the member is committing to the project, and if it equals the total AHP, so that includes the direct subsidy, the grant funds, plus the advanced subsidy. So that is the interest rate subsidy that we use on the subsidized advance. So you total those two together, and that is the total AHP. So not if you're doing a subsidized advance, we're not looking at the principal on the subsidized advance, we're looking at the interest subsidy plus the direct subsidy. And if the member's total financing equals that amount, you'll get your 10 points. We do have an extra 2 points available for long-term fixed rate debt or tax credit investments. So that's up to 2 points. Like I said, 1 point is for a 5-year term, up to 2 points for 15 years or longer. And just a little help screen here, just a screenshot of the member funding section. This is where the sponsors are going to enter all the data for member financing. You're not going to be putting this into your budget sources. It goes through a slightly different process, so that way we can easily track the member financing in a project. Make sure all your data is correct, including the origination fees and the interest rates. It really slows us down when we have to go back and get this information. So please make sure it's in there. It is required. And then members, watch out, because you'll need to proof this data during the member review period. So if you have any questions about that, definitely feel free to reach out. The next one, just kind of a mock screen with the direct subsidy, a subsidized advance, and other loans and investments. This is the member funding screen. It'll calculate the AHP interest rate subsidy on the subsidized advance for that subsidized loan if you are doing that component of the application. Again, origination fees and interest rates. Use the member documentation like the letter of interest or commitment letter. This is really important because we need that documentation to match what you have in the application. Again, it slows us down considerably if what you have in the application doesn't match the documentation that you're submitting. And so for the points, we're just going to add up the member financing amounts and determine which portion is for long-term and the total member financial participation overall. And then we've got subsidy per unit. So this is variable. This depends also on whether or not you are a rental project or an ownership project. Again, the application builds on itself, and very early on, you're going to state if this is a rental initiative or an ownership initiative. It branches off considerably from there. So again, take the application in order. The subsidy per unit is a fixed formula. You can do this on your own with the IP. We're going to be looking at the basic formula is the maximum subsidy per unit minus the requested subsidy per unit divided by the maximum minus the minimum times 5 points. Sounds confusing, but it's actually really easy to do. It's in the IP. You can self-score this. There are the ranges for points on rentals are $5,000 to $65,000 per unit to get in the scoring range for rental, and $15,000 to $75,000 for ownership. Less subsidy per unit results in a higher share of the variable 5 points in this category. But again, as I mentioned, please do not overpromise and don't chase points, especially in this category. It is what it is. If you need the money, that's great. Some folks just don't score well in this category. and that's completely understandable. Please don't chase points. Ask for the subsidy that you need to make your deal work. AHP really only comes around once a year, and you can't modify your award without reapplying later. So don't try to make it work to max out your points here. Just tell us what you need, and the score will be what it is. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Kathleen to take off with targeting and some of our last few scoring categories.
Thanks, Mike. And Mike's advice rings true in targeting as well. Don't overpromise your targeting, because you'll have to go through a modification and cure period, and just stick to the units that you know you're going to be having. And we like to see it, line up with your other funders too. But for targeting for a rental, the maximum points is 20 points. We do score our rental and ownership applications a little bit differently. So for the rentals, points are calculated on the percentage of total units that are either 50, 60, or 80% AMI. They all have their own multiplier. And you multiply the percentage of the units times that multiplier equals your points. And when you add them all up, you'll know what you're getting for this category. This setup does reward initiatives with deeper affordability. So for homeownership, the points are only awarded for units targeted to homeowners below 80%. Again, percentage of units times by the multiplier is your points. There is no difference on the 50 and 60% AMI for homeowners or home buyers, excuse me. They both use a multiplier of 20. And at or below 80, that multiplier jumps to 18. So housing for homeless. This is a variable category. At least 20% up to just under 25% of the total reserved for homeless is 3 points. And if it's up to 25% or more, it's 5 points. But keep this in mind, these units need to be set aside and dedicated for homeless. We are going to require third-party certification. This is not a category to be used for those who are at risk. And it's also not to be used when you're going to do your best intention or use a Section 8 preference. So these truly need to be set aside and dedicated for homeless. So home purchase by our low or moderate income buyers is up to 5 points. And keep in mind that for home purchase, it can be new construction, substantial rehab. If there is rehab, it must be a minimum of $15,000 in rehab going into the home. The counseling, homeownership counseling must be included. We will request documentation for your home buyers that they have attended counseling. It is a requirement not only in AHP, but also our homeownership set-aside programs. And there are a list of acceptable counseling agencies available on our website. And the formula to calculate this is 5 times the percentage of the homeownership units. This is generally 100%, because when you're doing a homeownership initiative, it's all homes. So you're generally going to get 5 points here if you are targeting low and moderate income buyers. So empowerment. We've changed this a little bit. It's 1.5 points per service for a maximum of 6 points. Now, these are services focused on economic empowerment of the residents. They must be offered and available to all residents, absent any program eligibility requirements or criteria. Basic referral services are not eligible for points. If the project does have a service coordinator and they do provide an eligible service, this would be eligible, but it must be documented properly. If you're using a resident service coordinator, identify the service or services that are offered in the other category. You must execute the sponsor or agency letter of commitment with each service provider. And also keep in mind, you're only allowed one other per category. So All these services must be available within 6 months of the project's completion date, and we will be verifying this at project completion. For some more detailed information on this, you can refer to the implementation plan, attachment B, page 11. Again, I am going to highly stress, no template, no points. And these templates, there's a sponsor template if the sponsor themselves are providing the services. And then there's also an agency letter if you're using an outside agency to provide these services to your residents. And that agency letter will need to be signed by not only the sponsor, but also the agency organization as well. So community stability. It's been refreshed and modernized, and it's worth, this is up to 20 points. And there are other opportunities within each of the categories to receive these points, but I believe it's actually up to 17 this year, excuse me. So for up to 5 points, if your project fits in one of these categories, under preservation, please look at our implementation plan to review our definitions of what preservation is. There's also points available for spark growth, where you build, how you build, and accessibility to services is worth up to 5 points. And then sustainability and resiliency, up to 10 points, rewards initiatives that help to minimize or reduce their carbon footprint and create energy efficiency, energy efficient and sustainable communities. So the bank does prioritize sustainability and efficiency and resiliency for these homes for our low and moderate income residents. Spark growth, sustainability, climate resiliency. A project team member or architect will need to confirm by a signature letter that your project will receiving Enterprise Green, LEED, or Energy Star, Passive House. It's a good opportunity for us to remind you that under the new reg, inability to fulfill any of your qualifying characteristic items is viewed as non-compliance. So we just want you to know that when you're selecting any of these items on your application, please know that if you don't do it, it's non-compliance, and you could be in jeopardy of losing your award. So preservation, this is moved to community stability, as I was speaking about it just before. And as I said, eligible projects can receive up to 5 points. And we also accept revolving loan funds in this program, but AHP can only be loaned into program-based ownership initiatives. Specific projects are no longer eligible for points, but if you have a revolving loan fund that is helping homeowners in different ways, that would be eligible for our revolving loan fund. Smart growth. This category provides you to choose whether you're going to use Enterprise Green or LEED certification. You can also go for Energy Star and Passive House certifications. And you can, and if you're using Energy Star and Passive House, there's also options for you to select individual elements. And selecting individual elements will help you earn points in separate categories. So there's 3 paths for smart growth and sustainability. You got to choose one. Are you either going Enterprise Green or LEED? Are you going to have an Energy Star or Passive House and then some other features? Or then are you going to do like the a la carte and just select individual elements for your project? So think about that before you start the process. So continue on with smart growth, location and site. You're allowed to have up to 1 point. This is a sensitive site, brownfield, or a location near diverse resources. Housing density. This is based on whether it's a rural or non-rural location and the building type, and depending on how many units are on that site, you can get up to 1.5 points. We also reward points for transit access and transportation services. Again, there's options for rural and non-rural locations, so please see our implementation plan for those specifics. Sustainability and climate resiliency, as you can see here, there's different levels, and these are the things you can choose. It runs from materials and solar, ventilation, so up to 9 points on this category. And again, as you're choosing these items, please be sure it's something that you are going to be able to actually deliver. So AHP scoring summary, as Mike said, you have the opportunity to see how you're scoring it. So when you get to this, you're going to want to review your scoring and see if the score adds up to what you anticipated. This is a good check to make sure you didn't miss anything, or that all your documentation is there. So just if you do a self-scoring before you enter the application, you'll have a better idea at the end when you get to the scoring page if you have met what you anticipated meeting in this application. It's a good self-check to make sure that you're getting all the points that you expected. So some key reminders. As I just said, use the scoring page to proof yourself. Do you have your site control and donated documentation? Are your empowerment templates signed and on the correct templates? The minority and women business owners, have they all completed the self-certification affidavit? Again, that's a change for this year. The individuals themselves are going to be self-certifying that they are eligible. Also, don't forget to upload your member financing commitment or intent letters, and make sure that the member financial data is entered correctly. All of these items are extremely important and can cause you to lose points as we go through the application. There's nothing worse than having a fantastic project that you're reading and excited about, and you get to the empowerment templates and they're not signed, or they're not on the right template. I mean, those are a lot of points that are lost right there just by not following the directions. So AHP resources. We're going to tell you that we are your #1 resource. Please reach out with questions. We go back to the IP all the time when we're discussing with each other, when we're reviewing applications. So please reach out to us. We cannot guarantee you points, but we can help get you on the right track, or we can make sure that you understand what is expected. We're here to help you, and we want to see your applications be successful. So I also suggest that you download the AHP implementation plan, have it on your desktop, or if you prefer the paper, have it available to you. The plan is on the website. Please make sure that you're downloading the plan that was effective March 17th of this year. That is our guiding policy document, and that's where we go to get our answers. So that's your #1 tool, and we're your number 2. We're here to help you. So now moving into questions and answers. There are several questions here to talk about. So the first question that we have is, can you talk more about member limit of subsidy and how that works in practice? So each member is allowed up to 25% of the subsidy that is available for the round. I often tell sponsors to have these conversations with some of the larger financial institutions out there, just to see if they have multiple applications going in, because we can only award up to 25% of the available funds to one member. There are workarounds. A new member would have to be brought onto a project, but it's very important to have those conversations up front with your financial institution, just so that you're aware if it could be an issue. Another question is it possible to access the application concurrent with filling out the sponsor registration? sponsor registration needs to be completed first. The second thing that needs to happen is you need to invite your member. Until those two things are done, you will not have access to entering anything into the AHP application. So as Mike said, this application builds on itself, so the process is also part of that. Sponsor registration, member invite, and then you can start on your application. Here's another one. Have you seen applications for a building that is twinning project? One building, 2 condos, each with affordable housing units. Would the AHP look at the entire building, or would each condo be looked at separately when scoring? If the buildings are coming in under one project, I guess it depends. If there's different ownership structures, it could have an impact. Theo, did you want to opine on this one?
Sure. It's a really great question, and
Yeah.
I think you've answered it perfectly. If there's 2 different owners, if it's 2 different condos, then it really is 2 different initiatives and can apply for AHP separately. One application for each condo. The real trick, though, is also this also applies to multi-phase projects. We really do need you to be doing a very good full accounting, so you know all the costs that attribute to condo 1 versus condo 2, because we can't have any cross subsidization. So AHP subsidy in number 1 can't be funding a cost in number 2, or vice versa. And it's actually like an important distinction for multi-phase projects too, and this is all part of the need for subsidy question and documentation. So we'll talk about that in the feasibility webinar in more detail. But you've got it spot on. And we have seen multiple condos apply in the same round because they're both on track from a construction scheduling standpoint.
Right.
Another question that came in is, do you have a sense of what the minimum score will be this year? We really don't, to be honest with you on that one. Last year, the scoring range was huge due to various factors that came into play in terms of who was applying for applications and how much funding we had. Historically, the scoring range for funded applications generally fell to like the 68, 69, 70 points as a minimum, up to high 70s, a few projects in the low 80s. You can't get 100 points, so don't feel bad if you can't. But in the past, low 70s was usually a strong score. But for this year, we really don't know. The application is competitive. It's this year we have more money available, but the cap for what you can apply for is also up. We are expecting more applications this year, but we'll see what happens. So I'm sorry that we can't provide better guidance on that, but we're just as curious as you, to be honest. See another question here: examples of member financial participation. I think as I was going through that section of the presentation, this question I think popped up before we covered that. But for member financial participation, we're looking at construction loans, lines of credit, permanent loans, tax credit investment. If you are doing a line of credit, the catch there is that the full amount needs to be drawn for at least 6 months for the project to earn the points for it. So if you're doing a line of credit, just give us a call if you have any questions about it. But otherwise, if it's a construction loan, a perm loan, LIHTC investment, that sort of thing, that's all considered member financial participation.
Yeah, it's Theo. We're right at our hour mark, but we do have a lot of other questions Mike, do you want to run through inclusion, Mike or Kathleen, do you want to run through inclusion? And then, there's a question about nonprofits counting as NWBE.
So nonprofits are ineligible. It has to be a for-profit entity on that category, unfortunately. We understand every year we do get folks that ask about board members and board participation and things like that, but this is a for-profit category only.
And continuing on that, there was a question about if the team hasn't been set, can they, say they're going to have someone that would fit the eligibility? No, these team members need to certify an application that they qualify. So you couldn't just put a placeholder that I'm going to fill this with someone that meets these criteria. That certification needs to be done at time of application.
A really important question too came up here about new members participating. So we, as part of the application intake, we're looking at sponsor capacity where, if you are a new sponsor and you're new to development, we may be looking to see if you are partnering with a more experienced organization to make sure that you have the capacity to handle an AHP project. And on the member side, we strongly encourage new members to participate. We love it when new members come into the fold, and we are more than happy to provide technical assistance and training to the member to go through the entire program, soup to nuts, as much help as they need to become an active member in the AHP program. It's one of the benefits of membership in the Home Loan Bank, and we strongly encourage it.
There's a question about can the self-affidavit for DEI be included in the application materials, which it might just say it needed to be uploaded with the initial registration. That's done within the application, the certifications.
Right, and so sponsors, if you're a for-profit MWBE, or you would upload your affidavit in the sponsor registration. For other development team members, you'd be uploading that in the body of the application.
And then a question about subsidy per unit. So this is going to be on your total AHP subsidy. So it's the direct subsidy request plus the advance subsidy. So the total request can be up to 1.2 million. So that's the direct subsidy. The grant, which is capped at 850, and you can fill out the balance of that up to 1.2 million with the interest rate subsidy. So that's the AHP advance subsidy. Add those two together, the advance subsidy and the direct subsidy, and that is what you're going to be looking at for subsidy per unit. It's not based on the principal of a permanent loan, just the AHP funds in there.
We have another question about previously awarded. Can you apply for a new award even if you signed off on final agreement, but you have not used the funds? Yes, if you've not had a disbursement from us on a previous award, you are eligible to come in and apply on this round, where you would obviously be eligible to receive additional subsidy. What happens is you apply this round for the funds that you want. And if you are awarded, we deobligate your old award. So you'd only have the 2023 award. So if you're considering doing that, make sure that you're asking for all of what you want, not just an addition to the award you already have, because the award you already have will be deobligated if you are awarded within this round.
Question 2 about narratives in the application, and can you get those questions prior to officially opening the application? We really don't have any true narratives in there. We do ask for you to describe your project at the outset, just so we know what it is. But then the only real written responses that we'll be looking for are in the feasibility section, and we'll get into that in the next webinar. For any deviations from our guidelines, we do ask you to quantify why you are falling outside of our guidelines. We'll cover that in the next webinar, but those will be on a case-by-case basis. But really, The only written response in the application is that project description, and it doesn't get scored. It's just enough information to help us understand what you're doing, what's involved. Some folks like to write a lot, others don't. Give us enough information to understand what you're doing though.
Another one is if a project doesn't have a real address yet, since the town hasn't assigned a tax parcel yet, can we use an approximate address? Yes. We understand that sometimes the addresses that come in on projects are not necessarily the final addresses to the homes, and we will make that update once those addresses are complete and we receive the certificates of occupancy or other documentation that shows to us what those real addresses are.
A question about sustainability certifications. So the IP is kind of is very specific as to which certifications will automatically earn you points in a category. Kind of a shortcut in a way that we want to reward folks that are getting green building or LEED certification. However, the scoring is designed in such a way that everybody has access to all the same points. So there's no advantage to having a LEED or enterprise certification in terms of scoring. So you can go what we call the a la carte method. If you are getting a different certification, just look at what those different categories are for that certification, and you'll fill them into this application, and you'll be able to get the same points most likely. But for the purpose of kind of taking the shortcut for enterprise or passive house or LEED, we are going to be looking for those specific certifications. But again, everybody should be able to have access to the same points depending on what your project is doing.
There's another question here about subsidy per unit. What do homeownership applications enter as a max? Page 18 says the range goes to 75, but the example shows 40,000. That example is based on last year's subsidy, so that 40,000 will be replaced with the $75,000 this year. We will go back and make that edit. So yes, that example is just using last year's totals.
Yeah, and a big mea culpa. That's on me. So we appreciate the question for sure, and we'll
exactly, yes. So we can go and clean that up.
Site
There's another
control
question about
okay, sorry.
Application submission deadline. They have not acquired, but they're pursuing with an option in performing their due diligence. Yes, that is acceptable. An option to purchase is an acceptable form to show us that you are pursuing site control.
We just need to see the dates on that too, to make sure that it is valid within 12 months of your award. You need to show that you have full funding and the project is ready to move forward. So keep an eye on the dates on that. Often we get, not often, but sometimes we get projects that submit expired options or options that will expire before we make an award decision. Obviously, we can't have that. We need to see that that option is going to at least take you into January of 24, because we're going to be making the award decisions in December.
We
There's
get
a question if a same company can submit more than one application. Yes. Sponsors that have more than one project that fit into the program are definitely able to apply for more than one award.
We got a
question about sorry, Theo, just a quick question about tax credit purchases and the project structure that might change. When you're doing your application, we're asking you for a snapshot. At that point in time, we realize that these projects are coming to us at various stages of the development process. And we don't want you to be chasing your tail. We know that things change. We want you to look at what your project is at the time of your application. If the structure changes and tax credits are no longer part of the member financial participation category, or no longer part of your budget, we're going to be looking at that as we go forward. If there's a change to the scoring, we're going to be looking for why this is happening. Often we do have projects that submit thinking, okay, you know what, in the next year we're going to be applying for tax credits, and we're awaiting a decision on that. That's fine. But if you're denied those tax credits, we may not be able to stick with you either. But again, if something changes with what, if you're able to cover that gap within the 12 months, but the member is no longer obviously buying the tax credits, then that will impact the scoring. The scoring is, again, it is a live document. So, there's the potential that the member financial participation could drop from 12 to 10, in which case we would rescore your application. We would look at what the lowest funded score was, and if you fall below that, then you would no longer receive funding from us. So it's important that as the project develops and any changes that come about like that could have major impacts on it, that you let us know and we can work through it and try to figure out a solution.
Really important. We got a question from Jeff at Catholic Charities in New Hampshire. We have a long-standing relationship with a Home Loan Bank member who does not have previous experience with the AHP.
I already covered that one.
Oh, you did? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. In case you missed it, we will help them. We'll provide any assistance that they need.
All right.
There's a lot of questions, Theo, about providing a copy of the webinar. We'll be sending this out, or we'll just be on the website?
I'm going to be emailing it a PDF to the attendees today. We will be recording a spoken version of this in YouTube, which will be available later on this month. There's a question about brownfield.
Oh, the debt service. Yeah, there's a debt service coverage ratio range too, 1 to 130.
And we'll get into that also during feasibility with a little more detail. In our feasibility, they are guidelines. They're not hard and fast requirements for all of them. So any sort of deviations on feasibility, we'll be looking for an explanation. And with debt coverage, we're going to be looking at the 15 years of retention to see what happens with that. Quite often they start high and low, that sort of thing. So it all plays out. Project by project, we'll be looking at the entire lifespan of it. Question about brownfields. Is it considered a brownfield if the city's cleaning the site before the development occurs? I would say if you're applying for funds and it is currently a brownfield, that it would still remain a brownfield if the development, if the part of the overall project is that it's getting cleaned up. I don't know if Kathleen or Thea, you have different thoughts on that, but
yeah, we would just need to see the documentation that that it was deemed a brownfield.
Right, and and being funded separately or outside of this project, I think we'd look favorably on that. I know Micah has a hand raised. Unmute you, Micah, and you are self-muted. So feel free to unmute if we haven't answered your questions to this point. Did we miss any questions? Doesn't look like it. It's lead or enterprise green.
There's still some questions about the member limit. Do we just give it to the highest scoring developments? There's still some unsure about how we determine when a member has more than 25% in awards.
Yeah, so that scoring would be, we would rank the members' applications and start from the highest scoring application from that member and just go down until they hit that 25% cap on the total pool, and that's where the cutoff would be for the member, regardless of how well those other applications scored. So your application could very well fall within the funded range, but it would get set aside because your member had already exceeded the 25% cap on that.
Right. And we do have a scoring tiebreaker methodology baked into AHP.
Oh, Micah was trying to unmute himself, but it wasn't allowing him to. There's one more question here. Would an R&D project with prepayment eligibility be eligible to receive the 4 points for preservation?
I would say yes, but I think the specifics really do need to be addressed about the property. The general standard for preservation is being able to document that there's an existing deed restriction on the property that restricts its use as affordable housing. And then there are 3 different elements within preservation that you'd be checking. If it's an expiring use that's happening either in the past 24 months or the future 24 months, that's important. So if there's evidence of financial distress or physical distress or imminent foreclosure, we want you to upload that as well. And Micah, we've successfully.
Yep.
Go, Mike.
Yep, I see now I'm able to speak. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I was just asking, I think, I'm not sure if it was answered or a little bit, but, I asked a question, if, project was, formally awarded the grant, but, had not used the funding. But, is it possible, I mean, would we still sign off on the final agreement of the grant and then reapply for this new plan? Or do we have to rescind the funding before signing a final agreement on the existing grant?
Micah, I mean, you can sign the AHP agreement and have it in place. But if you want to apply in this 2023 round to secure additional funding from last year's award, what would happen is your old award would remain in place. We don't take it away from you unless you're successful in 2023. If you're successful in the 2023 round, we will automatically deobligate your old award. So you won't lose it unless you get something in the 2023 round. So none of that happens until after we know who's getting awarded in this round.
Yeah, so you'd apply in 2023 for what you need in total from AHP, and we would offset the dollars awarded in 23 with the money that you have from 22 if you were awarded that. But we wouldn't do that, as Kathleen said, we wouldn't do that until after the decision was made. So we're not going to take away your 22 money. If you tell us you have a gap in 23, we're going to say, okay, you've got your 22 money. Now tell us how you're going to fill the gap because we can't give you any more. So, it obviously raises questions for us to say, okay, how is this development going forward if there's a gap in there? But it's not an automatic, stop for us or anything like that by any means.
Got it. Okay. Very helpful.
Yep. Someone asked what the 25% member cap was. I did a quick calculation. It would be just over $5.3 million for one member.
Yeah. This is really great questions, really great digging into the application. And so we really do appreciate that. I know we went a little bit over, but yeah, really valuable from our standpoint and hopefully from yours. We're happy to stay on the line, but if there aren't any other questions, we thank you for your interest in the AHP, and we look forward to working with you on these applications for 2023. Feel free. And
remember to reach out to us with any questions as you go through this process.
There's a question that just came in here. Peter, I'm going to unmute you, and all right, so now you can unmute yourself, Peter.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
So my question is about a project that received a previous award, but wishes to come in for, excuse me, additional funds and the subsidized advance. And my question is specifically around the subsidized advance and whether that can be applied to a member construction loan versus permanent loan.
No. AHP advanced subsidy is for the long-term permanent mortgage. It cannot be used for construction.
Because I thought I understood earlier in the presentation that you could use the member participation with a construction loan, letter of credit and so forth, but the subsidized advance can't be used towards that participation. Is that correct?
No,
That's correct.
So you'd be looking at it's kind of a two-part scoring system there. To get the first 10 points, we're looking at anything that the member is doing to financially participate in the project, whether it's construction loan, line of credit, their perm loan, that sort of thing. Separately from that is the additional 2 points, and that is only for the long-term member financial participation. And if they are doing, if you do want to do the subsidized advance, as Kathleen noted, that is only for to subsidize a member's long-term permanent loan.
Got it. Okay, that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
We're being asked to just repeat the member amount. Again, it's just over 5.3 million, would be 25% of the funds available in this round. And then last one that I see on my screen is our homeownership application permitted to include units over 80% AMI. AHP won't pay for any units over 80% AMI, but your project could definitely include some. That's fine. They just won't be receiving the level of targeting points that 80s, 50s, and 60s do.
Yeah, and this is kind of a real, yeah, we've got to, trying to square the circle a little bit here. So Justin Marshall, I think it'd be really important for you to reach out individually to us to talk about this, and anyone else who's developing homeownership, affordable homeownership as part of a larger condominium development or subdivision. We'd really like to talk to you about how you're thinking through the market rate housing. The HP regulation really is sort of clunky in this kind of a mixed income homeownership initiative. So we'd like to work with you to sort of square that circle, as it were, including all of the development costs under, as under the commercial column, because that's the basically the non-AHP column. Takes a little bit of work and thinking through, for sure. All right. Did we miss any other questions? Has anybody else got a hand up? It doesn't look like it. All right. Wow. Great questions. Thank you guys. Really terrific answers. Love everyone's involvement today. So I'm going to end our session if there aren't any other questions. So thank you, everyone, and we're happy to look forward to working with you on your applications this year.